fått beskjed om å vise til kamera. Nå det kan vi se hvor de filmer. Ja, nei, de filmer ikke nå.
Hei, flott at du kommer da.
Riktig navigasjon. Vi tar noen bilder akkurat når vi til så ber dere
Hei, Signe. Deilig å ha fisk. Ja, veldig bra.
Ja, det er litt sånn det som har kontroll på alt.
Ok. Ganske kjapt på. Ja, med en gang. Ja. Welcome to the opening of the Master Program in Accounting and Auditing, MRR, in Oslo. For the profession, the students, NHH, and me as a leader of MRR, this is a great day. Kjell Ove Røsok, by my side, will be the academic coordinator for MRR Oslo. A big thank to all others that have and will contribute to a successful MRR in Oslo and Bergen. Finally, but not the least important, I welcome our new MRR students. We are all looking forward to work with you. Today's program is on the screen. We have three eminent speakers. First speaker is the new rector at NHH, Professor Øystein Thøgersen. The NHH staff already knows him as an enthusiastic leader with vision, eager to make things happen. Øystein's background is professor in macroeconomics. Our second speaker is Professor Peter Amers at Free University Amsterdam and a partner at PwC. His specialty is digitalization in auditing, which likely is the most challenging issue facing the profession and educators today. Peter is also a member of IAASB Data Analytics Working Group, and a person that NHH will benefit from in integrating more big data and analytics into MRR and our research. Our final speaker is Professor William Messier at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and NHH. He is an outstanding international scholar in auditing with numerous publications in the most prestigious accounting journals. Bill has for many years strongly influenced the quality of MRR and has a decisive role in establishing auditing as a research field at NHH. Bill is also an honorary doctorate at NHH, as the picture on the screen illustrates. This brings me to another great event of the day. The award of the DNR Endowed Professorship for the advancement of auditing for Professor William Messier. The purpose of the professorship is to stimulate auditing research and attracting and supervising PhD candidates in auditing in a combined effort by NHH and DNR. CEO DNR Per Hanstad, Rector, and Bill, please come to the floor.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I want to use this opportunity to congratulate you with this new master program here in Oslo. I think it's very important, as you said, for the profession, and it's so important for the students. And I think this will contribute to the education of the future auditors in an even better way. We have cooperated with NHH for many years. We have already the scholarship that we offer for PhD students in auditing, and there is a couple of them, at least one of them, I think, here in the audience today. So if some of you in the future want to take a PhD in auditing at NHH, you have a good opportunity to get some financial support. This Endowed Professorship that we now have agreed to contribute to over the next 3 years, I think will even be a better opportunity to strengthen the auditing and the research and the academic work in auditing in Norway, and that is extremely important, I think, for the profession. So, and especially it's very nice to have Bill Messier as the receiver of this professorship for the next 3 years. I know that I know Bill for many years, and we know all that Bill has contributed a lot to the research in auditing globally, and also in the work regarding auditing at NHH in Bergen. So I will mark this this professorship by handing over to you to sign an agreement. And lastly, I mean, there is a lot of students here, and the Norwegian Institute of Public Accountants has a lot to offer to students in this field. So if you want to become a member, it's free, and there is a lot of favorable offers that you can get. You can only send an SMS to DNR student to 1960, and then that's it. So, or you can speak to some of our representatives here during the breaks. So thank you very much, and congratulations.
And yeah, for you.
You can stand here, and then I just want to take a photo of them and you together.
Okay.
And then you just stand, look against us.
No.
And then you group together. And there we are. And then you can all say hello or take your hands up or something. Hey. Cool.
Okay. Let me say a big thank you for this outstanding contribution, a very important contribution for NHH and the field of accounting and auditing at the NHH. It puts a lot of responsibility on our side, and I will assure you that we have 100% commitment, whole NHH, to support all the efforts in accounting and auditing in general, and in particular this big new effort in Oslo, which is a big undertaking. We take it 110% seriously because we want this to be a big success, which is an okay point of departure for you as a students, because we put all the resources necessary into making this into a big success. So thank you again for the big contribution, and thank you to Bill, not least, because we had to fill this position with an outstanding score, and the choice was obvious. I will argue. So I look forward as a rector to continue the cooperation. We started yesterday. We found out that me as a macroeconomist and you as a professor in accounting, well, actually we had some strong interests, common interests. But I will not go into detail about that right now. But I look forward to the future cooperation, and we have 100% commitment on our side, and that's a good starting point. Good.
I'd like to thank Perrin Institute for giving me this opportunity. I'm certainly honored. It's been a long time here at HH, and I've loved every minute of it, and I really appreciate you honoring me this way, so thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very excited about this day, and it's a pleasure for me to welcome our first speaker, our rector, Øystein Thøgersen.
Thank you. And let me start. In terms of now focusing on the students, because you have made an excellent choice, so obvious starting point today for me is to congratulate the student, but an obvious second point is to congratulate all the faculty of the accounting and auditing department, because they have shown so much enthusiasm, so much effort, and I really, as a rector, love to see that. You know, every time I've met Kjell Ove and Åsmund and Ingrid the last year or so at NHH, in Oslo, on the airplane, they are talking about this. You know, this has to be a success. You know, this has to be a success, and I love that enthusiasm. I love that enthusiasm, and for a rector, that's a good thing. So basically, I hope that all the other departments show the same enthusiasm, but they are not here today, so let's focus on auditing and accounting. So congratulations to Åsmund, Kjell Ove, and Ingrid Cecilie, which is on the backbench, but sometimes the most important heroes are sitting back, just to assure that everything works completely fine. And also thank you for me to be here and to give this opening sort of not lecture, but sort of opening of the whole study. I will talk about NHH visions into the near future, because you are, as new students, you are newcomers at NHH. Well, you are, most of you have actually been students at NHH back some years, but you are newcomers right now as students in accounting and auditing, and I'm a newcomer in the position as rector. So then we have something to common, and we are looking into a bright future, I will argue, and I will talk a bit about my visions for NHH going forward, and not to surprise you, but I think the outlook for this program, the MRR program in Oslo and NHH, you know, they fit nicely together. So I will talk about that. And then, since I'm luckily got 45 minutes, I will also talk about some more scientific issues where I really want to bridge my own field of macroeconomics with the fields of accounting and auditing. Because you can, as most of you do right now, you can ask, is there any relationship between macroeconomics and accounting and auditing? And wake up in the middle of the night and suddenly I saw light, you know. It was a sort of, yeah, it was a tight relationship. I want to talk about that, you know, in the second part of my talk. So let's start with my visions for NHH, and some of you are at NHH every day, so you have heard it a lot. For those of you who have heard it a lot, get used to it because you will hear it even more. And for you as students, you haven't heard it before. So I really want to have an NHH in the year to come, starting right now, characterized by substance, relevance, and visibility. And for me, those keywords are essential for NHH outreach to the corporate world and to society. And for a business school, that's essential. It's more than essential, it's everything, you know. A business school has to have a strong outreach to the society in general and to the corporate sector and the business society in particular. Otherwise, we would just be a faculty at the university. That could also be nice, but then we would not be a business school. So what do I mean by substance? Of course, NHH is substance. That is our DNA, you know. Substance in terms of a lot of independent, strong researchers doing excellent research in their various fields. That can be accounting, auditing, that can even be macroeconomics, finance, this and that strategy, and so on and so forth. So that's the key, you know. We have to be proud of our research. That's the foundation, you know, for everything we do. But as a business school, relevance is key as well. And substance and relevance, from an NHH perspective, fits 100% together, you know. Our substance should be relevant. Relevant, at least in the slightly longer run, has to be founded on substance. So substance and relevance. And these days, it's very important for us as NHH professors to really highlight the relevance part. The world is changing really fast. The world is globalized. We are not only competing with other Norwegian institutions, we are competing with institutions everywhere. So key is relevance, you know. We want to attract the best students, and not only the students that are interested in research as a lifetime perspective, but also students interested in a normal business career based on relevance. We have to be 100% relevant in everything we do. And since the world is changing, we have to change as well. And since we want to be not only a follower of competitors, nationally and internationally, speed is essential. You know, speed is everything. And a bit of direction as well, I will argue. So that's some of my colleagues, they love the word speed, but then they say, okay, but what about direction? And I've talked about that, so I will add a bit of direction as well. But my message today is that in a situation where the world is moving really fast, and we have this high ambition, we have to highlight speed in the decision processes at NHH, in our focus on continuously ask ourselves, do our courses in that field, this field, stand out in an international competition? And if the answer is, well, we don't know, then we have to innovate really fast. And we do that, you know, trust me. And as a business school, visibility is also key, you know. Sometimes we have at NHH had diamonds, you know. But when we hide the diamonds, then they don't shine. So visibility is key. And visibility can be, of course, media appearance and so on. But that is part of it, of course. But I'm more focused on the steady, everyday interaction between we as NHH faculty and the business community, and we as NHH faculty, and government institutions. That can be the central bank, that's a natural counterpart for me as a macroeconomist. That can be other public institutions, the Ministry of Finance, different ministries, and so on. So visibility is partly media and so on, but is also about the continuous cooperation between us and you, represented here, as a part of the business industry, businesses or industry sector, and different public institutions. So our ultimate objectives at NHH is education, top education. We want to have a lot of focus on innovating what we do in terms of how we do it, in terms of pedagogics and so on, and in terms of content, of course. We want to have strong research, not only strong, that's an understatement, but top international research, and as a separate objective, and not only something that is implicit in the two first objectives, we focus on outreach to society. And this particular study, and that's part of why I really love to stay right here in front of you right now, is that this is the prime example of outreach, NHH, outreach to society. You as students, but you are mostly students associated with some of the most interesting big and smaller firms we want to interact with are sitting right in front of me. So NHH in Oslo, starting this program right now, this is one prime example of outreach to society. And of course, there are other forms of outreach to society, but as a business school, that is a separate goal, you know. If we want to shine, you know, we want to have a clear outreach to society. Media, one thing, good, but the everyday interaction, even better. So, based on this, we have some strategic priorities. We are starting a strategy process at NHH now because we are a new leadership and so on. And we should do that in the best possible way. But sometimes these strategy processes are not moving fast enough, you know. So we do have the strategy process, you know, should have that. But we are also at the same time front-running our own strategy process a bit because some objectives are so clear, you know. One of them is NHH presence in Oslo. Say no more. We are in Oslo right now. You are the first cohort in this program. And NHH presence in Oslo is important. You will see more of it, not the opposite, you know. We have executive programs and so on in Oslo. We have this class. It's an innovative thing, you know, along several aspects, also the technical ones. This will be very interesting, and we will put a lot of effort into it. And we'll develop our presence in Oslo along several dimensions as we move along. We don't have to wait, at least I feel that, and because I'm the director, I can decide actually. So I don't have to wait for the strategy process to conclude that presence in Oslo is key. We have already decided that, you know. Alumni network. Every top business school in the world has a strong alumni network, you know. And I've heard that message from several key players in the Norwegian Business Society. One of them, Henrik Liseth, some of you know him, I guess. He has spent 4 years at NHH, and then he moved to Harvard for a year. And I talked to him, and he's an enthusiastic guy. And he said, okay, look at Harvard, you know. They have this and that program. You know, that should be the goal. So, yeah, he is right. You know, that should be the goal. And of course, it takes a bit of time, even if you have a lot of speed, to catch up with Harvard. But we are trying, you know, we are trying. So in October, 18th of October, we have this first big alumni conference in Oslo. Mark the date, everyone, you know. That's a big thing, 650 seats available, and there are a lot of alumni, so when the, you know, so be quick, you know, register quickly, and be there. That's a big event for the alumni, and that will be an alumni kickoff in a way. We have had alumni for a long time, but that's a sort of, you know, not very big alumni focus. No, we want to strengthen that focus. A lot. So pay attention, be in Oslo in October, Hotel Plaza, only 650 slots, so luckily are those who get one of those slots. It's like, you know, a concert with Bruce Springsteen, you have to be very quick in order to get that slot. digitalization, needless to say, that's important. You know, several years ago, we knew that that was important. So nowadays, we are implementing digitalization, fintech, tech issues into economics with a pretty high speed. And I want to continue that push and really make it to a big push. And again, that will be an important part of our strategy, but we are also front-running the strategy because here we can't wait a second. So NHH has therefore decided to be a partner in a new initiative, Finance Innovation, as a sort of cluster with all the big banks, DNB, Nordea, and so on, and Sparebanken Vest. Jan Erik Kjerpeset here is the CEO of Sparebanken Vest, is a key player, but all the banks are in there, and of course all the big four, yeah, or big five, sort of inflation maybe, big five, in the accounting and auditing is part of that initiative, and a lot of firms going also into the tech sector. So another important guy is Henrik Lie Nielsen, the tech expert. He started Knowit, you know. Some of you know Knowit is a sort of slightly technical consultancy firm. Really important partner for NHH because we want to move in that direction. And right in the middle, I find myself, and that's cool, of course. But what I want to highlight is that the symbol, you know, that NHH is right in the middle of an initiative with a nice name, Finance Innovation. So we are there. We have a lot of courses in our master program and also in the bachelor program. In fintech, and fintech here is, you know, we should interpret it broadly. So fintech is business analytics, strategy, and so on. But of course, with a big content of digitalization. So based on this initiative, we should increase our already very high cooperation with the finance industry, and finance industry is, you know, really broadly defined. And we will also combine analytics with tech. And as this will be implemented very fast, so you as new students, you will get a feeling of the outcome of all these efforts. NHH in Oslo, as you see, this is barcode, no doubt about that. But where is, what is this? Well, it's NHH. So we are in the middle of Oslo. We are together with you in a way, and we are here to stay. So let me go to the sort of second part of my introduction. Sort of chapter 1, and now I'm moving into chapter 2. So, for me, I'm a macroeconomist. And, okay, we are, you know, focusing on not single firms or something like that. We're focusing on nations, different nations, interaction between nations, interest rates, growth, and so on. Is there a relationship to accounting and auditing down there in micro, you know? And I've already given you the answer, so let me convince you that the yes answer was correct. Because when we should think about macroeconomics, I will argue that we make often, as macroeconomists, make a mistake, you know. I normally don't admit that, but yeah, maybe today. It will not happen often, but maybe today. This is 3 pictures. Simple chart. This is GDP, you know, a real GDP in the Eurozone to the left, US in the middle, Norway to the top right. And what we see is that the trend growth rate, the underlying trend growth rate, is remarkably stable for a long time. We can have big business cycles, big recessions, but often the macroeconomy is, at least the long-run trend growth, is surprisingly robust towards business cycle fluctuations. And look at Norway. Where is the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, 2010? Well, it's here. You know. It's not a very big thing. We see it, you know. But that was the Great Recession, global recession in 2008, 2009, impacting Norway. Growth is back. But oops, what is happening up here? That's the oil, you know, oil price drop and the consequences of the oil price drop. It's big in terms of consequences, at least if you live in Stavanger. But for Norway, so far, well, not a catastrophe, I will argue, unless you have a big house in Stavanger you want to sell. But here's the US. Here is the big recession, but growth is back. The growth rate is back. But we have not bounced back to the old trend. But still, it was the biggest recession since the 1930s, so growth is back. The Eurozone is a different story. We have had 7-8 years with zero growth. That's a lot of pain, you know, in terms of unemployment and this and that. But now growth is picking up a bit. So this story this chart tells me that in terms of welfare, growth, we over-focus on the business cycle swings and focus too little on the driving forces for the underlying trend, you know. So that's my criticism towards my own field. But, okay, I'll come back to that. This is the shock hitting us, you know, our most important price, the oil price, is down to $50 per barrel. And sometimes we expect, okay, just wait a bit, and it will peak again, you know. Some forecasts for oil are very optimistic, you know. They say, okay, because oil prices are low, a lot of capacity will be shut down, and because it takes time to invest and so on, when too much capacity is shut down, oil prices will peak again, you know. I've heard that forecast or proponent of that way of thinking a lot of time. And they have been consistently wrong, and in response, they just adjust the forecast to say, okay, but no, you know, it will soon peak. If you will become popular in Stavanger, you have to tell that story. But I guess the main scenario is that oil prices will never peak up to this high level again. That's maybe good news along from many countries. It's really bad news for a country with a lot of oil. So that's part of it. And the second part is also not good, because we have the largest sovereign wealth fund on earth, you know, the Norwegian Oil Fund, 7,000 or almost 8,000 billions NOK. And of course, what is the effect of this huge fund on the consumption stream or national income in Norway over time? Well, that depends on the return of the fund. And once we believe that 4% after inflation was right, but now we believe that 3% is the maximum we can expect, maybe 2%. Of course, and this is the fiscal rule, handlingsregelen in Norway, you know, what it delivers decreases. And we are at the top, you know, and that is widely known for the regular newspaper readers. Maybe not the regular newspaper readers, but this audience in terms of the segment of the newspapers readers that are in this audience. They know that, okay, we are at the top level when it comes to the impact of the fiscal rule on the Norwegian economy. So in a way, two shocks at once. The return on the fund will decrease and the oil price will decrease. Two super cycles are turning. You know, the activity in the North Sea is declining, and we believe nowadays in 3%, maybe 2% return. Last time the oil price dropped persistently was back in time. I guess some of you in the first row recall 1980s, 1990s. And here is Norwegian GDP. You know, it looked like the Eurozone these days, or the last 10 years, completely flat growth, drop in aggregate consumption, a lot of unemployment. So that was the last time the oil price dropped in Norway. Will that happen again? No. Read my lips. The answer is no. Because we learned a lot from that oil price drop in the mid-80s. We created the fund. Okay, the return is lower, but the fund is really big. In the 1980s, mid-80s, we did not have a fund at all. So the invention of an oil fund was a big, big achievement. And the political achievement, not to have the discipline, is an even bigger achievement. So now, as we know, politicians along the whole political spectrum, and that's really interesting, all parties, at least all relevant parties, have committed to a 3% rule, And then we can continue, our consumption of oil with this annuity in effect. But the annuity will not increase. We are used to increases in the annuity value of the fund. But now it's flat. We are at the top, But it will not decline, So we learned a lot. Very low interest rates, the central bank deliver. The exchange rate is weaker. That's good for competitiveness of the Norwegian economy. So all the business cycle responses are good, completely different from the mid-80s. But is that the whole story? Happy days are here again. We can read that in the newspaper. Okay, it's over, it's over. No, happy days are here again. Even in Stavanger, the house prices are increasing again, So relax, it's over. Party time again. That would be the right conclusion, and you can read that conclusion all the time in Dagens Næringsliv, for instance. That would be the sensible conclusion if our problem was only a business cycle problem, Then we are back. We can bounce back to the trend and even go above the trend. But the problem is that we don't only have a business cycle problem. We have an underlying trend growth problem, I will argue. Because the oil sector is down, a lot of resources should go from the oil sector, are going as we speak, and into other sectors. Will the new sectors, the new industries, have the same productivity, profitability, and so on as the oil sector in the good days? Well, that depends, The answer is probably no, Probably no. So therefore, we have a trend problem. A structural problem is also accepted, but often forgotten when it comes to the medicine, in terms of what policies is needed. We are not in short supply of aggressive business cycle policy, monetary policy, and fiscal policy. We are not in short supply of that. But we are in short supply of structural policies. And now I'm approaching my answer, that accounting and auditing is really important for the macro. Structural policies, that's much tougher because it becomes much more political, partly ideological. Are market efficient, in general? Product market, labor markets, and so on. Are the regulations well designed? We talk about all sorts of regulation, competitiveness, regulations related to the financial industry, and so on, which are necessary for a smooth reallocation process. And then you are right in the middle of your business, who are smoothing and greasing the transitions you need when sectors are when labor and capital are moving between sectors. Then you are right there, right there. Because this is in the macro book, this happens by, over the night, A shock here and whoops, labor and capital over to a new sector tomorrow. But in reality, there are a lot of dynamics going on, and not by itself, but with help of advisors and experts and so on. You are experts in auditing and accounting and finance in general, right there, being the grease and oil in that process. Robust financial institutions, financial stabilities, of course, competence in accounting and auditing are key for the processes. Tax system, incentives, this is often forgotten in Norway, the incentives of the tax system necessary for growth, transfer system, social security, human capital, infrastructure, and say the word infrastructure, a lot of people think about roads. You know, I love roads, particularly where I drive, but infrastructure is so much more. It's the whole society, the legal structure, the financial structure. So you have to think broad. And we have to have a climate for innovation, startups, and so on. These are key factors deciding whether or not new jobs and businesses will have a high profitability or just an average profitability or even a low profitability. And right there, in the middle of the processes, in the micro, completely necessary for the processes to go on, I find you know. So that was when I, you know, normally when we wake up for a dream, it's a nightmare, oops, and you wake up soaked in sweat and so on. But this was a nice dream. I woke up, oops, I seen light, you know, I seen light. As a macroeconomist, there's a strong relation between you know, from me as a macroeconomist, sometimes too you know, obsessed with interest rates and the central bank and the fiscal policy. But I saw light, you know, woke up, a lot of energy, new insight, you know, without all those experts being the key players for the sectoral adjustments processes and the quality of the regulations, the financial structure and so on. We need competence in accounting and auditing. They have macro effects. So you are macro players in a way. That is my last word. You are macro players, and that's the nicest thing I can say to anyone I've argued. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A very interesting talk. And you lived up to your own ambition. This was a speak with substance, it was relevant, it showed the visibility. And the speed, yeah, you did 45 minutes and 30 minutes. So now we can take 20 minutes break. Coffee and water. Yes.
Siste dagen. Jeg tok bare 4 stykker og gikk, jeg. Ja, men det er jo 100 kroner spart. Jeg bruker egentlig bare sånn du er sånn som men jeg gidder faktisk ikke å og så er det litt sånn uskyldig hver uke sånn som det er for mye å lese. Men de bøkene må vi sitte bare gå inn. Det er ikke veldig sånn særlig. Eller kanskje det er bare på siden. Men det verste at han får så mange steder, så mange sånn. Nei, jeg får det. Var det fint? Det er andre. Nei, det var jo de synes også det problemet at jeg gir ikke stemme på at jeg kjenner det gir jeg ikke. Jeg tok bare jeg har noe Jo, men det var ikke så mye. Det var bare...
Så tror jeg ikke de får gubbes. De får sikkert aldri det. Nei, hvis jeg skal.
Det burde vært litt mer som er globalt. Det er ganske men egentlig så er jeg tror ikke det, fordi det skal jo spille oss der. Aviser kunne jeg ja. Det virker som at man har ganske ja, man kjenner det hvis det en gang setter på det som han var jo tydelig tatt. Du får det styring. Veldig godt. For det skal jo faktisk. Til og med jeg tror jeg setter styret ja, ja. Hallo.
Welcome back. In line with the concept of this program, as you see, there's a lot of film cameras, a lot of photographs taken today, so it might be that you will find your face on our website, on our publications later on. But now, we're going to the next speaker, Peter Einars.
Well, thank you, Chairman of today. I'm rather honored to be here, visiting Oslo, visiting Norway. It's the first time I'm in Norway, by the way. And when we entered the airport this weekend, we thought, oh great, how many texts we can understand. The Dutch and the Norwegian have a lot of things in common. And I thought, well, that's good for you also to learn a little Dutch. So I've here this is my only Dutch wordings here, is verder kijken. De VU is verder kijken. This is my university, the Free University of Amsterdam. We call that the University of Amsterdam, but we also have the University of Amsterdam, so it's a different one. So this is the University of Amsterdam. Is verder kijken. Who knows the answer? What is verder kijken? How would you say it in English? Who dares? Who has the guts to say, I know the answer? What is it? Dutch grandparents, you still know. They learned you. You know. I told you.
Kijken, that's quite similar to Ochike, no?
Yeah?
So looking forward.
So skip some letters and then you have the right words. Yeah, that was like Scrabble, by the way. The game that you are using, different wordings are different here. We walked through the city and then we came to the National Theatre. If you stand in front of the building, you see National Theatre. I thought, well, that's great. That's Dutch. That's English. That's great. But then we went to the tram stop, and it has theatret or whatever. I have no clue why you did it, but anyway, you changed your wordings. The way, by the way, that we quite similar. I guess that will be because of the Vikings who entered the Netherlands some centuries ago. Thank you for that all. So we have something in common. Just to introduce myself, I'm a professor in auditing at the university. I'm in the same position as you were. You are. I was in the same position 25 years ago when I started my career at PwC. At that moment it was still Coopers & Lybrand, but I joined that firm. I'm still working at the same firm. That's, I guess, because nobody wants me, nobody else. Anyway, I became a partner at PwC. And in the last 13 years, I worked in our national office, our technical department, telling people how to audit. So my role was to tell people, to teach my colleagues, my 1,800 colleagues in assurance, how to audit. And then I pushed the reset button last year, and I went back to audit practice. I'm signing off audit opinions myself again, and in this case, in the public sector. So I'm now doing what I preached people to do for 13 years. And I can imagine, you can imagine that's a hard job for me now, to have the daily story like you may have some of you have already started your career at the firms. Yes, you have the daily story about staffing, clients who are complaining. You have your audit methodology, which is not always clear. You have a regulator who may come in, whatever, all kind of sorrow. I'm doing it myself again. But besides that, I promised myself 25 years ago to become a professor. One of my professors asked me whether I would write a PhD, and said, okay, but not at university. I want to make a PhD in the cutting edge of practice and academics, and that's what I did. My topic was, by the way, analytical review, the use of analytical review, analytical procedures in auditing, a long time ago. But in the end, I became a professor, in this case in Amsterdam, and I'm teaching now people like you. And I'm combining that with PwC. For me, it's an honor to play chess at different boards, because it's when I'm telling my students how to audit, I can also tell it to my colleagues and vice versa. And the case studies, the anecdotes, those can all be mixed. So that's great for me to do. At the university, I'm now a frontrunner in digital auditing. We started a new executive program on digital auditing for all those auditors who have become auditor prior to the technology breakthrough. So 22,000 auditors in the Netherlands who have born too early can go to our program and to have some preparation, right? some maintenance in their program. So for you, it's not needed, of course, because you get the right program at the spot. But maybe for the older people, you may fly into Amsterdam. Anyway, that's good. The reason why I'm here, that's by occasion that Asmund asked me in March when we met in Amsterdam about this program. I said, well, it's a pleasure to come, but let's then talk about data analytics. Let's talk about technology. And just before we continue, who of you is a student just started today in this master program? Who of you, can you have your hands up? Okay, a lot of them. So the others are, on the first rows, are people who have more experience in auditing, I guess, or university. Okay, good. So I'm talking now to you at the end of the room. Okay, and we can talk about technology, about are auditors surviving or not, but and I can tell you a whole story. But let's ask you first, what is your opinion now? And I suggest you now to pick up your smartphone and go to kahoot.it, and you will get the question, can you enter a PIN code? And then I have 5 questions for you, and let's see how the heat is in the room here. What is your opinion at this moment? So let's go to Kahoot, and I will show you the PIN. And it's coming now, connecting. Oh, sorry, I will. I had to say you may enter your name. You may enter the name of your neighbor, by the way, if you want to use a nickname. It doesn't matter at all, but it has to be registered. It's not a quiz in a way that you can win a prize here. Being here is a prize in itself, but it's good that you pick up that point. And I already tell you, you only have 20 seconds to answer the question. 20 seconds is quick. If you're not answering, you didn't raise your voice. 61. Are there any more people who are willing to join? 63. Who wants to get in and is not yet in? If not, then we are raising the first question. So I was at 63. 62. Very good. 64. Okay, let's start. So the first question is the following, and you're being asked to give the answer. It's rather easy to click on the right stuff. 5 questions. Go for it. And the first one is about, in 10 years' time, we will have more than 90% robotized audits. in 10 years' time, the audit is almost fully robotized. We don't need people anymore. Computers do the work. Is that for sure? Surely not. Not so quickly, or no idea, you're kidding. Okay, so 47 out of the 63, 4, 5 is saying for sure. Surely not. Who said surely not? Who dares to raise the voice? Bill. Okay. Maybe asking you, the students here, who of you said, surely this will be the case? A lot of the work we are doing now can be robotized, can be standardized, automated, whatever. Who says yes? What answer did you give? Is it normal with Norwegians, by the way, that they don't answer? That they don't answer? Or? No answer. Okay. I hope you, well, it may be difficult to raise your voice, but you're really encouraged to raise your voice later on during this presentation. So feel free. It's called the Dutch directness. Just jump in, and then we pick up. Surely not. That's the question. Things will change, not so quickly. I can imagine. No idea. Lucky you, you're in the right room. Okay, let's go. But this is just the heat of the moment. Let's go to the next question. There was no good or wrong, by the way, as you can imagine. I just wanted to know your view. The second one. Technology is more important at large companies than smaller companies. Considering that you have in Norway a lot of smaller entities. And IT is more important at larger companies than at smaller. Yes, no, or equal. Yeah, the majority of you says it's equal. Some say it's more, and only a few say it's less. Anybody who wants to speak out why you chose the answer you tried? Who dares? Come on, it's your day. Come on. What's your view?
Yeah, I am among the three.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
So I think technology is a blessing for the small companies, making them more, allowing them to have the potential to be more competitive than their big firms. So
okay.
The more I think about it, I'm sure I'm right, actually. So
yeah, but also in this question, there's no good and no wrong. Okay, anyway, and somebody else who wants to add or say something quite different? I hope you are louder in voice during the rest of the week. Anyway, let's go for the third question. Data analytics is a substantive audit procedure. Oh, let's now come to methodology. Data analytics is a substantive audit procedure. Yes, no, depends, or that is relevant going forward. Data analytics is a substantive audit procedure. Okay, some people say, the majority says yes. Well, half of them then says yes. It depends. Who said it depends? It depends, yeah. Yeah, but sometimes you need to have a fierce answer, say yes or no. Why would you say it depends?
What would I say?
Yeah.
I think in some cases it could be used for control testing, which would not be a substantive
Yep.
procedure.
Okay, I come back to that later, by the way. So, and maybe my answer could be, why bother about whether it's controls testing or substantive testing? It's just about answering the question, where's the risk, and can I cover that with my other procedures? But I come back to that. No worries, by the way, if you answered the first one, because a lot of auditors are saying that. Now, your future, the next generation auditor is an IT auditor. The financial audit of the future is an IT auditor. Yes, no, or no idea. You at the start of your career now. Okay, 45 says yes, 13 says no, and no idea. Okay, let's see how we can rephrase this after my presentation, whether you are at the same track or not. So keep in mind what you answered now, and let's see whether that will have any benefit from what I'm going to say. And the last question is, I'm looking forward to being an auditor in the coming 10 years in this rather rapidly changing world. This is my passion to be an auditor. Yes or no? Or I am not sure. And those people on the front row who are going to retire somewhere in time, of course you go for the passion of why you became an auditor. And I'm really curious what you are saying. Okay. I hope those two are only in the front, the first two rows, and not in the back. Otherwise, you can leave the room smoothly during the presentation. Okay, that's why I'm here. I had the passion to become an auditor 25 years ago, and I still have the passion to be an auditor in the future. And I'm really eager to play a role in this society here, but on a global level, of course, too, about being an auditor. And for me, the fundament of being an auditor is that you dare, that you as auditor, you can be of benefit for society. You're not for yourself, you're someone for the other. Whether it's your client at a multinational entity, for the shareholders, whether you are living in public, when you're working in public sector, what I'm doing now, I'm auditing universities and schools at the moment. I'm there making them shine in society. And the billions, especially in the public sector, the billions of public money are floating through our hands. And we are granted to say something about it. We are granted to say, yes, you can trust these figures. Yes, you can trust this company or this institution. It's great being an auditor. And whether it's an analog era or whether it's a digital era, it doesn't matter for me. You have to change. You have to be adaptive as an auditor. And that's great being an auditor. And I hope for you, especially for the students, that you are really eager to play this role with us, because it's very important. It's a great role that even society, that the government granted us as a monopoly together to have this job. There are not so many jobs in the world, also in Norway, that you are granted by a state that you can do this job. So take care for yourself, take care of the others. But we will handle that later during this presentation. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. Yeah, the question is, who are the winners? Does the auditor survive? If you read the story about robotizing all stuff, that on the list, the top 10 of professions which have a huge effect, are hugely affected by technology, then accountants are #1. Take into account, by the way, it was an English survey by the Economist, whatever, an accountant in English sometimes means bookkeeper. But you can imagine also for our profession, it really will change. Whether you are an auditor, when you are an accountant, whether you are a tax advisor, all things change. The whole world is changing, especially in the professional services environment. So yes, it's really changing. And then we have regulators in the world, collectively mentioned IFVR, who are years after years already complaining about audit firms, about auditors who are doing not the right job. So if you look at for instance, the FRC report in the UK every year, and the PCOB report in the US, I have in my own territory the AFM, was rather fierce, that 40% of all audits are not compliant. 30% of all audits they reviewed were not compliant. What does it mean? If you would be a car manufacturer and 30% would have rectangle wheels instead of round wheels, or have no klaxon or whatever, that's weird. So, and they are pushing to audit firms to improve quality because we dare in society. So it's good that they are the mirror for us, but it's also very important to learn what they are saying to us as audit firms. On the other hand, if you talk about robotizing, then you also get the counter reaction. For instance, about blockchain. Blockchain will change the whole world, and everything, if it goes from left to right, everything will be okay. Nothing can go wrong. So why do you need auditors in the future? Well, there's also skepticism about, hey, wait a minute. As long as people are in the world, people will commit fraud one way or the other, especially at your client side. And that's, no, my client is worth it. My client has a good control environment. So there's no fraud. There will be no fraud here. Come on. Every company there will be a fraud, and the question is when and where and how. And it's up to you, up to us as auditors to identify that. And if you talk about robotizing, it's always, as long as there will be human beings, you have to be skeptical what can go wrong. Even in blockchain, even in other big data environments, you as an auditor, you have to behave skeptical. You have to, and have to make your judgments, professional judgment in there. So it's very important to be an auditor and to remain an auditor. So auditing on the scrutiny, the rapidly changing world. Okay, congratulations, entering the profession. But if you then look at the picture, what's coming up to us, we have grown up. We as older people, we have grown up that there is a financial statement year after year, one size fits all, becoming more and more complex. We have to audit, and we give an audit opinion, which is quite the same as last year. Is that all? And will that survive in the future? Will it survive in a digital world? Well, the good news is, and that's, sorry, I'm first answering that question and then come back. The good news is that that because of technology, there will be more tailor-made assurance coming up. That if you have now the financial statements and the bank and the shareholders and the tax authorities, they have to deal with the outcome of the financial statements. In your opinion, they may ask more granular, tailor-made solutions in a digital way. And I don't know whether you've heard about the XBRL developments. That if you can combine all kind of data in the filing of financial statements, you can imagine that if you have a whole bunch of data leading to a financial statement, leading to the tax filing, leading to a tailor-made product for the bank, it can be possible that auditors can be eager to give assurance over processes and all kind of information. So it would be rather greater and far more product than only the assurance product as the audit of the financial statements. So the whole spectrum, what we can do as auditors, and that can be of relevance, can be far broader than in the past. Going back to how pervasive IT is. And my statement is, every company is an IT data-driven company. Every entity is an IT data-driven company. And I will show you that with a simple example on YouTube. It was a pilot in 2012 at Tesco. Tesco is the supermarket chain in the UK. When they built a pilot at shopping at Gatwick Airport. So let's see whether I can start that YouTube movie. I will break in after 1.5 minutes, but then. And my question is, what are you seeing now? Which kind of company are you seeing now?
The idea came from us talking to customers. We know they like shopping on the go. We know what a pain it is when you come back and all you want is a cup of tea. So we put those two together and we came up with this idea. You can order your groceries before your holiday and have them delivered when you come back. On average, you have about 70 minutes when you're through check-in. That's dead time. Now it can be put to really good, efficient use. Okay, so let me show you how easy it is. You touch to start, and here you are in a virtual fridge. And you basically choose what you want. So on the app, you press scan, and I want some semi-skim milk. So I go in the milk. Did you hear that bleep? How satisfying is that? It's found it, and I'm going to add that. In addition to these 80 products, you can get access to all our 20,000 Tesco products from your smartphone. You then book a delivery slot, check out, job done. when you come home from your holiday, you've not got time, or it's quite early hours in the morning, you just want to get up.
Okay, this is just, I'm breaking it now. You can watch further if you want. But the question is now, what kind of company did we see now? Did we see a supermarket or something else? Did we see a web shop? And my statement is, you saw an IT data-driven company, occasionally selling bottles of milk and packets of butter. Like every supermarket, like every bank. The DNB here, your bank, is an IT data-driven company, occasionally having some savings account by people and selling mortgages. The university is an IT data-driven company, occasionally having people in the room and a lecture in front of them. I told it to my clients, by the way. Those are universities. And one of the supervisory board members said, "Oh, that's ridiculous. We are a university and we're quite different." And then I said, "Okay, let's now walk to the cellar, pick up the cable of the electricity and see whether all your operations are running still." Then he said, "Okay, I'm done." You're right. So we are so dependent on IT that walking around the computer is ridiculous. And if you even, as auditor, would believe that you can walk around the computer, your client is running fast in new developments on cloud, security, all kind of stuff. And if you can't speak that language anymore, you're gone. You'll vanish as an auditor. Kodak had, you know Kodak, the company? All the ones, no, still Kodak. Kodak had 20 years to vanish. Kodak was, by the way, the first company who invented the digital camera in a design department. And then the board said at that moment, no one, a photographer will switch from the old fashion for the normal way versus the digital cameras. So they skipped the whole production of digital cameras. It took them 20 years to finish, to go bankrupt. We as auditors, if we walk around the computer, we are lost. We are lost in space, and we are not given 20 years. So really, we have to absorb that every company is geared in the middle by a computer. Don't walk around the computer, but embrace the computer. Going back to Tesco. What you see here is a whole chain of things going on in the computer. By downloading the app, scanning the product on the bulletin board, identification, registration, login, shopping, shopping basket, checkout, payment, delivery. The whole chain, or the majority of this chain, is fully IT. It's not a supermarket. Yeah, it has some stocks, fine. But in a sense, it became an IT company, IT data-driven company. So assume that you are the director of that company, of Tesco in this case, and you collect all data every hour, every day, on every website, or even in every physical supermarket, physical location. What could you do with the data? So it's a blue ocean of data. You collect a mass of data, millions of bytes every day, 24/7. So what can you do with it? And that's why data analytics is so interesting here, and big data is so interesting, that people say, wow, that's a great opportunity to walk through it, to see it. So that's great to be at the marketplace and say, okay, if that's the case, if I first as auditor have to understand that IT is so pervasive, then what kind of opportunities it can give, and now every audit firm is running fast in proposing and doing proposals and tendering to clients where they that they are the front runners in innovation. Who of you is working in an audit firm who says we are front runners in audit innovation? Not in Norway. In the Netherlands, by the way, we had the required tendering process for public interest entities 3-4 years ago. So every audit firm had to switch clients because of the new legislation. And every audit firm told the clients, we are the front runners in data analytics, we are better than the rest, and we have great solutions for you. It wasn't picked up in Norway that you are, if you are tendering, maybe not on your side, maybe, I understood you were from EY. Are you, can you reflect on my statement that audit firms are rather eager in presenting in proposals that we are innovative?
I think digital is, of course, one of the key megatrends driving audit together with some other megatrends as well. It's obvious to all our competitors, I guess, that is one of the key things. And we are, of course, investing along, I guess, all our competitors in this. And of course, we always believe that we are the best, and I guess the others also believe similarly.
Yeah.
So.
Sure. That's always good to have proud about we are the best. But also that's a rat race, that if you are confident now that you are a front runner, tomorrow you will be the backbencher. So it's going rather fast. The point is here that it's easy to convince a client that you are great with data. You can say, I have the great tool with great algorithms, give me the data, and within 24 hours I will blow you away at the screen because all my intelligent analysis I give you. And the client will absorb that. Say, okay, let's do it, here's the data, fine. Sorry, yep?
I have a question about the virtual store.
Yeah.
How come they even use these boards? Aren't they kind of superfluous? Couldn't you just go straight into the shop on your phone?
So are they?
Why do, it's not really about your presentation, it's just that you seem to know quite a bit about this Tesco project. Why do they actually use these boards? Why don't you just go straight into your phone and do the shopping in the basket?
Yeah.
Why do you have to do all this scanning? It seems to take quite much time. So isn't this kind of, not the way I would do it, but I guess they have some idea behind it.
That's a good question. I hope it was good for the microphone too. Hearable. But that's a good question. Why it can't be simpler? You have to imagine that it was 2012, and we are now in 5 years later. Yes, it is so easy. It's running so fast. We have no clue what will be on our smartphones over 10 years. 10 years ago, the iPhone was built. 10 years ago. It's a man's life, a part of man's life. But have you any clue what will happen with virtual reality in the coming years? It's running so fast. Your buying signal, I got it. Let's continue with that. But convincing a client that you are great with data and great with analysis based on data, that's easy. But for me, that's consulting. That's not auditing. Auditing is not sorting and filtering data. Auditing is collecting corroborative evidence, and in the end you will say, I'm convinced that these financial statements give the true picture of reality, a true and fair view. So you have to do something with the data, including asking yourself, if I see this picture here, am I done there, or do I still need to do a sample or a controls test? Yes or no? So it's about making decisions, and that's auditing. Auditing is making decisions based on your analysis of the client, about the client's processes, and then decide which audit procedures you are going to do. So even if you can have the great presentation to the client, what they can do with it, fine. That's about relevance of audit. You're giving back to the client what you can do with the data, that they can improve their processes. That's all fine. But the question to you is it only adding up work, or can we do less in the other things? And I will elaborate more on that in a minute. So a lot of things can be done, and that was my picture here about all kind of other assurance services. There's a blue ocean for auditors to come up with new products in this digital arena, including how to entangle the whole blue ocean on data and still remain relevant. I made a short animation about how data analytics will change our audit approach. And it's 2.5 minutes. It's a little long. I heard that the attention time for people is less. It should be always within a minute. But I try to do it with you in 2.5 minutes. And my question to you will be, what is your main observation here in this animation? You can, by the way, look it further on the internet, on YouTube, if you want, somewhere in time. Let's see.
An auditor's objective is to put a trustworthy signature on the financial statements. The signature means that to the auditor's best knowledge, the financial statements are free from material misstatement due to fraud or error. So let's look at the opinion as if it were Rome, and the audit process as the journey to Rome. We use the audit approach as a map to design our top-down risk-based audit approach. The map has been designed on the principle-based objectives and requirements of the ISOs. The digital revolution is radically changing the way auditors are going to work. The current audit approach makes the way to Rome complicated and is potentially leading us in the wrong direction. Let's reset and go back to the principles of an audit. Our objective is still the same, getting to Rome. The fundamentals of a risk-based audit are still valid. However, because the context is changing, the audit approach must follow. Digitization, increased connectivity, data standardization, and new data analysis tools urge a new and better audit approach. Data is becoming increasingly accessible and helps the auditor understand and identify risks of material misstatement. When gathering evidence, our focus is shifting towards digital footprints, corroborating with external evidence, including big data. Applying professional skepticism and professional judgment are still key. New data analytics tooling is giving us a helicopter view and a more powerful source of understanding all processes and helps us to target risk more effectively. We are designing a new data-enabled audit highway to Rome that's more creative, bigger, better, faster and stronger. Besides the journey to our destination, our objective is starting to look better as well. We are starting to see that the audit can be far more advanced than we expected, offering a broader audit scope with continuous assurance and assurance over non-financial information.
I can tell you something strange happened here. I never included in this animation the undertitles. Never. It's the first time I see it now. So somehow, your computer picked up the voice
Het
recognition.
doel van de accountant is om een geloofwaardig oordeel te geven over de jaarrekening.
That's also weird.
De handtekening betekent dat naar het beste...
So what happened here is that artificial intelligence came in now to say, hey, I can undertitle here in Norway, and whether any other territory like Sweden or Finland, whatever I could do. And that's weird for me. That something happened with this computer before I knew. So something can go wrong, can be different than in which was not expected. So even in an IT environment, something can go wrong. That's for me the lesson learned here. But what did you see here about data analytics? How it can change your audit approach? Who said? Well, that struck me. That was. You had a voice, so if I may ask you, what was your observation about this animation?
Well, first of all, we kind of dropped all these rules and standard procedures and all that stuff, so that means that we're going to do it different. The only thing that's going to be the same thing was actually the risk-based driven audits, and I guess the students here will well, we're going to discuss a little bit the problems with risk-based auditing. That's another story, though, because that's risky as well. What if you make a bad risk assessment? What happens then?
A risk may pop up anywhere, anytime. That's great. But so yes, the new tooling, new technology may change the way we are auditing, the substantive testing we are doing, the controls testing we are doing. Yes, it may change, and it will change, and it will change rapidly. And the question only is, why aren't auditors in the firms not doing this consistently over all their audits? And the question is this something new, or is it quite, or is it as old as the way to Rome? Because when I started my career 25 years ago, I used already ACL as a data analytics tool, and I guess that the other people here in the room acknowledge, well, we were using it for years. But there was more here on CADS testing, the computer-assisted audit techniques, based on the general ledger and the sub-ledger, and that was it. That is already a long time. But the problem with more data, more complex entities, ERP systems, whatever, we lost sight of those data analytics toolings, and it was difficult to pull the data from the system. But now with new modern technology, it's easier to extract the data, transform and load it in your system, and we can do far more with data analytics than only looking at the journal entries in the general ledger. So we are now it's easier to do business analysis, not to take all the journal entries, take all transactions in detail in a supermarket, every nitty-gritty product sold can be scanned here with process mining tools. But also, and talking about big data, that's one step further to connect even not only the system of the client, but also connect it to external systems. So if we talk about how it will change our audit, if you talk about, if you go from CAD to big data, the further you go here, the more the audit design will be changed, will be adapted. For instance, if just as an example, we have here a process mining visualization of purchase transactions, going from the purchase requisition towards the outgoing payment. And a normal process of the client is that they have this line here, the thickest line here, with the number of transactions and the amounts. This is in euros, but it doesn't matter to me which currency it is now. Is this difficult? No, it's not difficult. It only has the date stamp, the person who did it, and the activity code. 3 elements, and you can visualize it here. And you now see in a glance that not all transactions are in the 3D image are following the right route. We have some differences. We see here some changes here, that 11% of the transactions follow the process, and including the receipt at the end of July here. That's fine, that's nice to know. But then the consequence is that logical, yes or no? We see here a lot of transactions going another route. Is that logic, yes or no? When we first did the process mining at one of our clients, we showed them at the screen, and they were not happy. They were, by the way, very well organized, and they said, "That's not okay. Our process. This is our process." I said, "Sorry, this is just your data. These are your data. I'm just mirroring what your data are doing." So and they were not aware, even in this high control lines, that there was a lot of deviations, and they could improve their processes. But assume that you as auditor believed in the past that they have perfect internal controls or adequate internal controls. What do the processes tell you about what's going on here? So the data tell you a story. That's nice. Data can tell you a story. So data can help you. It's a modern technology. Like you have in your smartphone, you are looking, you can Google, you can whatever do. We hadn't that in the past, how easy it is to Google. So modern technology helps you. It doesn't say that I've audited now, by the way, because I'm just sorting and filtering data, I'm visualizing. But this can help you in stratifying your audit, in identifying what can go wrong. The risk analysis you asked for, about how rigorous is our risk analysis. And if my risk analysis is more granular, is better, I can focus my audit response in controls testing, substantive testing, far more easier in order to get rid of undue audit procedures, which did not cover the risks. Because what regulators now observe is that auditors they are doing some risk analysis and doing some audit procedures around, but then the regulators come in from the other side, say, okay, what audit procedures did you? Well, those are not sufficient. You have a deficient audit. Regulators, by the way, at the moment do not yet ask, is your risk analysis complete? Yes or no? But that's the next question they will pose, if you have done the rest of your work okay. But here, this helps you with visualization. It even helps you in comparing, if you would be a group auditor, comparing certain components. And assume here that we have 3 components across the globe. One is in Asia, one in South America, one in Europe, having the same SAP system, the client told you, and the same procedures. And we just extracting the data and see the similarities and differences. And I hope you see some differences. That's weird. Normally, as a group auditor, you would expect that if they are using SAP, they run the same system across the globe, all things will be the same. No way. Data tell you a story. So if tomorrow, if you would be the group auditor, and you know this, and you have to define your audit approach and redefine your audit approach starting tomorrow, what will be your response? You will change your audit approach directly in order to cope with inefficiencies, in order to cope with deficiencies in the processes, in order to have your view on deficiencies in the internal controls. So very important to do. So everybody likes data analytics. Everybody is enthusiastic about it. It's a hype. But if you then look into the mirror and a regulator like FRC in the UK came up with an inspection report, a thematic report this spring, and they indicated, and I just grabbed some some statements of them, is that audit firms are preaching that they are doing it, but they have not a consistent approach how they are doing it. So that it's not the given. It's not actual now that audit firms have already been acquainted fully in the methodology about data analytics. And the question is why. The question is why. And if you ask auditors in practice and you ask audit firms, then they may say, well, the auditing standards, the ISAs, are not covering the new world. So first the ISAs should be changed, and then I will change. The question also, are auditors or are old way educated auditors, old-fashioned way educated auditors, are they capable for doing this work or not? Or do you need more data scientists? Do you need more IT-driven colleagues? So maybe they are lacking behind. There may be concerns about reliability of data. So I get the data. How do I know that those data are reliable? Even if you have a situation where the IT general controls are not perfect, they may lacking. Can I then use the data? Am I allowed to use those data? All kind of questions. And is everything allowed? What is possible about data privacy? You know, the rather stringent European law now on data privacy. Well, you can't do all things you want. And so all things you can dream about using data, is it all possible? Is it allowed, yes or no? All those kind of questions. And talking about the fundamentals of being an auditor, yeah, what kind of assurance do I get from it? If I see the data, what did I do now? Is it control substantive test, data liable, and do the ISAs allow the use of data analytics? Well, good question. Who says, well, maybe the first rows here, who says, well, the ISAs do cover the data analytics era? So is data analytics included in the ISAs, yes or no? I can tell you the answer. The answer is yes, but not that much. And that's the reason why a working group from the IAASB, a data analytics working group, which I am one of the 5 members. We published a report last year, September, and we gave a state of art about this whole topic. And the picture you see on the left, that's me, by the way. We taped a video of half an hour to IFIAR, the IFIAR working conference for the inspectors, where we explained what the current state of art is. That was used at IFIAR as the regulators worldwide, and we were able to express them, and they were rather enthusiastic. IFIAR is rather enthusiastic about the possibilities of data analytics, including the topic about audit effectiveness, about audit quality. And the regulators are convinced that data analytics will increase audit quality, but then some things have to be done. This is on the IFAC website. You can look up later on. But if you talk about the ISAs, they cover data analytics. And I just give you a simple example in ISA 330 about responding to audit risks. There you see hidden in the application material. That's why it's called A16, that computer-assisted audit techniques you can use for using as a sample to sort or to test the whole population instead of a sample. That's great. So this ISA already says you are allowed to use data analytics, computer-assisted audit techniques. Nothing wrong. Even using it as a controls testing. So if you want to test the effectiveness of a control, you can do that through inquiry plus another test and such as observation or the use of cats. It's already in this standard. But now the key question, how old is this text? Now we are talking in 2017, but this standard was for the last time revised in 2010. But the same text, around the same text, was in 2005, finalized in 2003, prepared in 2000. Even in your time, I guess, Bill, when you were in the standard setting. Yeah, sure. So the predecessors. So this already was written at the millennium change that you are allowed to use data analytics. Well, you can imagine if you now mirror it to this situation where the whole world has changed significantly due to technology, that this text may be elaborated somehow in the future to enhance the use of data analytics. So people are happy reading this, One standard a day keeps the regulator away, by the way, dear students. So you start with reading the standards, and then you come up to this one here. So it's fine, but we as auditors, we need more guidance how to do this. So not that we need to do more, that we are required to use data analytics, but at least help us, dear standard setter, to do this. And the dilemma, which is rather confronting, is that a standard setter, the IAASB, who made the ISAs, they can be specifically here in this innovation stuff, they can be a front runner, but the best practices should come from practice. So audit firms have to come up with their best practice, and then the standard setter can align those to best practice for everybody. So do not expect as auditors that first the standard setter should come up with, and that you then in practice will act. Just act, because you are already allowed to use data analytics. Some statements in that paper, the discussion paper we raised, which was received quite well, is that it doesn't matter to me anymore whether data analytics is a controls test or a substantive test. The way you're using it, you can place it in controls testing or substantive testing. But can you imagine that if you have a risk, auditing is risk to response, you have a risk and you need to cover that risk. And we have historically we said we have two choices. First, invent the wheel yourself, that's called substantive testing, or use the wheel already produced by the company and consider whether the wheel is round. It's a circle, yes or no. It's controls testing. And now we may have a third one about you can also use those data. But I can also discuss whether it doesn't matter to me which kind of test it is. It just does cover the risk. So it's not a given that you, and that's the answer to also the survey question I raised you earlier. It's a substantive or controls. For me, it doesn't matter anymore. But standards may be enhanced on this point. Then further, we have been educated by auditing standards and auditing practices and audit methodologies about planning, execution, finalization of the audit. But with using data throughout the audit and extensive using, you can learn the learning cycles per cycle. Well, they will increase. So you will have a more iterative process using data, and especially when you're using it heavily. So also there, the standards may be adapted. But there are some practical and conceptual questions still popping up. It's about data acquisition. How do you get the data? Because it's easy to ask the client, give me the data, but how can you extract, how you can sort and filter, how you can be sure that the data are reliable? That's difficult. Standard setting will not solve that, by the way. Is it possible? Is it allowed, the legal requirements? How to educate the regulators, also very important, that if the regulators have been grown up in the old-fashioned era, like we all, how can we educate them to think like we are thinking? Because you are as fast as the slowest running chain. Also, the regulators have to be educated further. One of the elements was the video for the half an hour I said. But the regulators, I can tell you, are rather enthusiastic about the whole progress. They had two main questions. One is, are auditors in practice already capable of doing this? So what's the skill set? And the second one is, what is the quality control of the firms when using the tools? So who tells me that the algorithm in the tool is neutral? Sound question, I would assume. That's normally you would say, okay, give me the tool and I will produce. How do you know that the tool is robust enough? Good questions. Sorry, I wasn't there yet. I pick up some other things. Is that if you grab the data and you get exceptions, you get a bunch of exceptions. How are you going to deal with those exceptions? Are you following up detail piece by piece? Well, then you have a long shot in your audit. Or are you able to stratify? What is there a robust process to dig in to condense those exceptions? We need more guidance on that. The relevance and reliable of external data, especially when you talk about big data, and comparing internal with external data, who tells me that the external data are reliable? So if you are using external data, let's assume that you are going to Google and you type in something. How do you know that the answer is correct? Do you bother about whether the answer is correct? Well, if you are doing an audit, you have to realize yourself that the answer may be biased. at Google? How do you know? And what if it's not coming from Google, but it's coming from the state authority on finance or the Chamber of Commerce or whatever, that you say, yeah, this is public information, everybody knows it's okay. Can you then rely on this external data, yes or no? Good questions. Or do you have to audit Google just to give your answer? Of course, that's difficult. And it's not a given that external data, by definition, are more reliable than internal data. That depends on the situation. So all these things pop up when you talk about data, and the answer is not that easy. And we as a group from the IWSB have decided, okay, we are not going to write a new standard on data analytics, but we are interfering with all kinds of new standards popping up. So the new standard came along this summer about ISA 540 on auditing estimates. We had input on that. A new standard on risk analysis, ISA 315, we had input in it. So we are creating the building blocks. Because if you would wait for a new standard, it will cost, in the whole due process of standards, it will cost you 4 or 5 years. Have you any clue how the world will be in 4 or 5 years? So we have to cope with the situation that you as auditors have to make your decisions. And that's encouraging in a way that you are allowed to make your judgments. You as a professional, you as a firm, as audit firm. So it's great using your professionalism. If you talk about research, it's important that we are not done yet. And I have no clue whether you need to write a thesis during your master's. No. Oh, lucky students. no thesis. In the bachelor, they had a thesis, I guess, or not?
On this program,
no.
They have already finished.
Oh, okay, very good. But for researchers, it's also a blue ocean, and because the richness of data and how audit practice is acting, it's great. But honestly, how many researchers have I seen, and maybe Bill can add to that later on during lunch, about how many researchers were, how many research papers were there on what is the real effect in an audit? Did it help, yes or no, audit-wise? And case studies may help. And I'm just doing some case studies. I started a case study at a compilation engagement and an audit engagement, and I'm repeating that. I made an agreement with one of the mid-sized audit firms. They are picking up a certain client, audit client and a compilation client in the SME practice. And they are already finalized, so they signed the opinion or the compilation report. And we are asking the client to come up with the data from last year as much as possible. General ledger, filings, transactions, whatever. And then we try to get it done whether we can see how data analytics could have changed your discussions, could have changed your discussions and decisions, and whether it could change your audit approach, for instance. So it's about the richness of the data, and that can be that you can have better audit, so the quality will raise, or that you will be more relevant, that you can have the feedback to clients better, or that you can be more efficient. But let's also be clear about that. Efficiency you will not gain in the first year at a certain audit. I bought a house a long time ago, and my real estate agent helped me in buying the house. And we were standing in front of a house, and it had a great garden, great house. And I looked at it. I said, "A great house." He said, "Close your eyes." And I closed my eyes. I said, "What do you hear?" Cars. And now? Cars. Yeah, 24/7 there will be cars here. So you always had noise. So I said, okay, do not give that house. He told me that you can't have a great house, great garden, and a great environment. And especially in audit, it's for me the same. At the same time, if you want to have a great location in Amsterdam, don't complain about the garden. If you want to have great surroundings with a great garden, go outside, but don't complain about the commuting time to the city. For auditing, for me, is the same. If you talk about effectiveness, efficiency, and relevance, you can't have them all together. You have to choose maximum two of them. So if you want to invest as audit team, as firm, in data analytics, which one are you going to drop first? Is it about efficiency, relevance, or effectiveness? And I can tell you the most auditors will say, okay, then I drop the efficiency because I first want to learn. So if audit firms are running too quickly, say, well, this will decrease our audit costs. Congratulations, I hope for you, but it will not be the case in the first years. Or that you can have repetitive audits. So what I'm doing in public sector with universities, they all have the same protocol how to audit. They have the same accounting rules. You can imagine that if you have a repetitive audit, you can learn better and you can speed up your efficiency. But not as a given in the first year. I guess I already ran out of time, but nobody says to me that I have 2 minutes. Yeah, I waited for that signal. Just flipping through some others. I had some 7, and you can read it later on. But what if you really talk about what is the added value of data analytics? You have heard about scandals, accounting scandals, the last years. Could some accounting scandals have been prevented if the auditor had used data analytics? It would be a great study by researchers how to, whether data analytics could have helped. And some scandals could have been, I guess, could have been detected by data analytics, and some. Also be clear is that half of the financial statement is still making judgments, having estimates by the company. So also there can also be other causes, but a number of cases I guess could have been identified with data. And those data are evidence-based ingredients for your professional skepticism, and simulation tools can help. I'll continue with the to the last ones here. Well, the effect of blockchain and artificial intelligence, that's also very important in a way that if nothing can go wrong in the blockchain, don't we have any risks anymore, or are there popping up new risks? You can manipulate, you can hack the system prior to the blockchain. How does the auditor react? Research is needed. If I may summarize this here, that for me, technology is a blue ocean for the next generation auditors. It's a blue ocean for researchers. It's great being here, but core methodology. The methodology question is key because we can run fast. But if the methodologies of the firms do not follow what is needed, then regulators will come in and will blow you away in the first inspection. So it's very important to get everybody on board, and it takes 2 to tango, or maybe more than 2. We should overcome that. Data analytics is very powerful. It doesn't matter which appearance it is, and it will increase your skepticism. It will increase your judgment. It's great. And don't wait for renewed auditing standards. Just do it, because with the principle-based audit standards, you can already do the work now. But keep in mind what I'm doing now, and if I'm signing off, did I do enough, yes or no? That's the ultimate question for auditing. I'm now coming to the end of my presentation. I gave you some questions up front in the survey, in the Kahoot, and it was about, one was about, is the future financial auditor an IT auditor? Can I have your hands up who says, well, I changed my mind during this presentation? First was, well, no way that the IT auditor, that's a different story. Could you imagine that auditors should have more IT skills to understand what's happening at the client side going forward? I see some people nodding. And the other one is, what does it do with you if I'm asking you, are you eager to be in the profession as auditor for the coming 10 years? Are you still on the same shape? I see also people nodding. If not, then you can quit at the lunch. So I hope you may absorb what I told you. I wish you very good luck in your education, in finalizing your education, and be proud to be an auditor. Thank you.
I want to thank Peter for this very interesting speak. You raised a lot of interesting issues and interesting questions that is very relevant for our profession. So now we take a 10 minutes break, fill up some coffee, and we continue in 10 minutes.
Du skal også tilbake igjen og rigge opp i kveld, da?
det står det. Vi må få utstyret tilbake. Men der det jo litt sånn ferdig
det er litt kjappere.
Det lettere å fokusere på. Jeg tenker hvis vi skal gjøre flere sånn, hvis det blir mer sånn her i Drammensveien, så bør vi jo ha det ferdig upload på det. Så det blir bare å ta med seg litt hus, og så blir det jo
bare send det til Sigrid, du. Så tar du, jeg har notert ikke navnet på de som fyller. Det kan ikke være det. Bare notere eller...
Ja, det måtte jeg bare switche mellom ting. Så det var egentlig litt greit at du hadde den litt sånn. Ja, altså for at du kommer litt tilbake. Ja, jeg skal bare sjekke det. Det var jo at jeg siden hadde begge kanaler på, og så en gang så har jeg fikk på den. Det var jo vanskelig å berene litt sånn. Så jeg switchet mellom. Jeg så ikke så litt sånn hvis det blir da man skal bare jeg kommer tilbake til joggeskolen når jeg har stått sånn siden vi kjenner det ikke. Så jeg må lei av det. Jeg tok den foran i sted, men likevel kom han. Så det jo så den
men jeg synes også det er litt svagt tilbake. Smaker meg dårlig, liksom. Nei, men jeg skrev liksom bare at jeg var en person, og det ikke sånn jeg sjekker mail education eller sånn.
Hvis du også tenker at det virker forebyggende, for da hvis det kommer til å være fikst her, hvis du da ser at det er en søster.
Hvis du ikke gjør det jobben, så bare nei, jeg men jeg kan man liksom, hvis du skal svare på en mail, så kan du bare gjøre alt på en gang. Den er litt kjent. Og så den er at du liksom da har ja. Så er det litt gjort. Man må jo kopiere det. Messier. Jeg tror jeg har det. Vi har det på Det er best å være litt da. Men det er jo kvart, er det ikke det da? Og da tror jeg kanskje at det på mest effektiv måte.
Okay. Welcome back. This is the lunch. It will be held by Bill, and he was well introduced by Åsmund. So I just leave the floor.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure for me to talk today. Some of you in the back rows have already seen some of me from yesterday. If you looked on YouTube, and you'll see more of me in the next few days. Before I start, again, I'd like to thank Per and the Institute and NHH for honoring me with this professorship. I enjoyed your speech, Peter. I want to come back and hit on a couple things from my history. So when Osmond asked me to come up with a speech, I was really sort of unsure what to talk about given the nature of the audience. So since we're part of this professorship is to find PhD students, right? I thought I'd reflect on 40 years ago. It was 40 years ago this summer that I started working on my dissertation proposal with the anticipation of, at this time of year, looking for a job. And much of my research really comes from my experiences in practice. So I worked for Arthur Young, the predecessor of the one you acquired. And I worked on a Fortune 500 company, and I was fortunate that I got pushed along very early in my career. I had been in the Army and done some other things before I became a first-year auditor. And so in my second year, I was in charge of all of the internal control. This was a large multinational corporation. More than 50% of its revenues came from outside the U.S. So all of the things we talk about with group audits we saw. Starting my third year, I actually was in charge of the corporate audit. So I got pushed along pretty quick. So when I left and decided to go into academics, and I got to this point, what am I going to do for a dissertation? Three things came to mind. One was foreign currency. Back in those days, by the way, I come from the time when the monks were doing this work and we had abacuses. They don't know what an abacus is, right? So in the second year on my Fortune 500 company, they changed the way they accounted for foreign currency. And in those days, there were no standards on FASB, whatever it was. We actually qualified their audit opinion. This actually shocked me that, we would qualify the audit opinion for inconsistency in accounting. In those days, we gave it to them. The second thing was, in my second year, I told you I was in charge of internal control. So this is a large Fortune 500 company. In those days, you had mainframe IBM computers and very large IT staffs. We used to call them EDP, electronic data processing. And so we had this big detailed questionnaire, and we would send it over to the head of IT, and this is a very high position, and they would give us a 40-page response, single-space typed answers to all these questions about the IT environment. And so my job was to walk over and talk to the head of IT to make sure we understood this question. So about 3 minutes into that conversation, it was clear to me that he and I did not speak the same English. Okay? So, of course, being a good auditor, I ticked off and shook my head yes and went back and panicked to my partner and said, look, I had no idea what this guy was talking about. He said, don't worry. So the next year when I was the senior, I convinced him that we needed to get a real IT auditor in there to talk to that person. And so I believe that at that point, I didn't think we were doing a very good job in this area. And third was the area of materiality. And some of you, now we have standards. Again, back then there were no standards. So I was sitting around the conference table, and the partner was down there working. And we all were given in those days we didn't have a standard. We just knew there was one number we used. And so being a little bit brazen, I said to the partner, how did you come up with that number? We were running around here doing audits at X dollars. And he said, oh, yeah, it's 1 cent on earnings. So, well, that sounds reasonable to me, There's no standard out there, but that's how we audit. So when I got to doing my dissertation, I started with foreign currency. And I thought I'd be able to get data from companies. And it became obvious to me after about a month there was no way I was going to get that. I was not ready to start doing work on IT yet. And so I decided to do some work on materiality. And so a dissertation takes a long time, so it took me a couple of years. And then the first published paper I did was a review. So I finished my dissertation in '78. You can see it's published in '82. It takes a long time to get things into, we work at a snail's pace in academics at times. And so Gary Holstrom was the person that hired me at the University of Florida. He left the year he hired me and became a partner at Deloitte. And they used to run a conference, so he and I put together, this is basically chapter 2 for my dissertation. And it was the first paper that went back and reviewed all of the literature on materiality. There was very little scientific work done. It was mainly questionnaires, people sort of armchair researching. And so I put all that together in the paper, and then Gary and I drafted this, and it was published in the Auditing Journal. And it sort of stood the test of time for a long period. A lot of references to it whenever people did materiality. And then the main part of my dissertation was the first research that looked at partners' judgments of materiality in an empirical setting. And so I forget how many I had, but when you do an experiment, you sort of vary factors to see how people react. So in this case, I had 3 levels of audit experience with partners. I didn't know this going in. After I got them, I sort of categorized them that way. And then I also had, at that time, the Big 8, the non-Big 8. And what we did is I manipulated 5 factors. Which are the 5 factors that auditors would use? And so what we found is, and not surprisingly, that most of the partners relied on net income to make the decision, followed by earnings trend. At that time, there was a lot of worries about firms having their trends broken in earnings. And the other 3 factors that were in their assets and revenues and so forth, they didn't really use much. Now, that's changed, okay? And then I found that less experienced partners were more conservative in that they had lower thresholds for what was materiality, what was disclosure. And then I found some variances between the Big 8 partners and the non-Big 8 partners. And so I also published another paper out of this data that had nothing to do with accounting or auditing. It was more of a psychology paper. So then I digressed. If you do a dissertation, Foysteyn's laughing. If you do a dissertation, you're kind of tired of it. After 5 years, you want to go do something else. So I went back and started looking at the internal control. And a funny thing happened. Jim Hansen, who was my advisor at Indiana University, he taught he wasn't my dissertation advisor, but he taught the information systems seminar. And we used Joel Dembski, who was your advisor's book. Had nothing to do with systems. It was information theory mathematically, okay, what was all about information theory. And so Jim taught that class, and then he left, and I graduated, but we kept in touch. And I was at a conference in Florida, and one of the thought leaders from KPMG came in, and he said, you know, by the way, this is 1980-something, early 80s. He said, we've been thinking about this stuff, artificial intelligence. Now, almost no one knew about it then, okay? And it's just by happenstance, the week before Jim Hansen and I were on the phone, not emailing, not texting, on the phone, and he said, I've come across this stuff called artificial intelligence. So KPMG at the time was starting this funding of research, and so Jim and I applied and had 4 straight years of funding. Okay, so we tried to build what we then called EDP Expert. Today we call it IT Expert. And so it was going to be an expert system that would assist a computer audit specialist to come up with the control risk assessment. We tried all kinds of methodologies, neural networks, which are a hot thing today. So in 1980-something, I published a paper on neural networks, fuzzy set theories, and on and on and on. Eventually, we got the system with about 80 rules in it, but we ran out of funding, and the use of technology was... So in those days, a hard drive on a PC had 10 megs. You know, that's about... You couldn't store anything then. You certainly couldn't do many math calculations. So we sort of got it. What happened was all of our papers were not being published in accounting. This was too far-fetched for accounting and auditing journals, and we have papers in all of the best OR and management science. So I just stopped doing that and went on. So we did all of this stuff. So I also did some other work at that time on auditor decision-making. So then the story begins again. So the story goes like this. I came here in 1990 for a conference, and then decided to come here in 1991 on a sabbatical, so I spent 6 months in Bergen. And then Arne Kinsedal asked me would I come back and teach, and I, sure. So thinking I'd only do this for a year or two, so now I'm in year 28 or something like that. I'm not very good at predicting the future, you can tell. And so what happened was the then existing audit professor left to go to another school, and Arne Kinsedal said, would you help run the program? Well, again, I said, sure. Well, that became a little harder to do when I'm, umpteen thousand miles away. And so eventually, where did my good friend Osmond go to? they decided to send Osmond to the University of Florida to study, and I'll put study in parentheses. He was by the pool. To study. So he and I developed this very good relationship. He sat through our PhD seminars. We took some other courses there. And so one of the first things we did was to write a paper on what was called in those days misstatement research. And there was a long series of research, mainly done jointly between academics and practitioners, where the firm would distribute a questionnaire to an audit team and say, put down the 5 largest adjustments that you found. And then there were a bunch of questions like, what account did it occur in, who found it, and all this sort of stuff. So there was a long series. And I used to use that. It's pretty outdated now. But I used that a lot when I used to teach earlier in the MRR program. Okay? And so we summarized all the existing research, and we covered it. And it was published in the Journal of Accounting Literature. And I was the editor, so that made it pretty easy. I actually farmed it out. But then what happened is Osmond and I did a study just like that in Norway. Okay? We had, we asked for, we were mainly, again, looking at IT stuff, trying to look at the misstatements and draw some conclusions about what was happening. And so the 6th largest firms in Norway gave us data from about, I think it was 58 engagements. And so, the results are not surprising. In fact, they were consistent with the data in all the other countries where this was done. The major causes of the misstatement were missing or poor design, improperly applied controls, some other sort of thing about personnel. The increased use of detailed testing over attention-directing procedures resulted in being more effective. So at that time, there was a big push for analytical procedures, sort of the high-level attention directing, and they seemed to work. So, there wasn't much new in the paper, which I guess is comforting in that, whatever was happening here was sort of happening in the rest of the world. And so that went on. And then Osmond went back to Norway, 97, I think it was. And we continued to do a lot of work. As I said, this doesn't come quickly. You'll see the dates. Some of these things probably started, many years ago. But in the meantime, in 98, I was asked by Bob Rousset, some of you may know, he was a member of the IAPC at the time, which was the predecessor to IAASB, to join this AICPA's International Auditing Standards Subcommittee. And I think part of it was I knew Bob, but he also knew I had a lot of international experience. I've also taught at Bocconi University in Italy. And so there was a committee formed at the AICPA that was an attempt to reconcile the U.S. standards with the international standards. As you know, we've sort of been at that time we were outliers. And so that committee proceeded to do that, and then I was asked to chair that committee, which is really kind of interesting, an academic sitting around with the major methodology people for the firms. But I actually did get to sign the letters we sent to the IAASB and that sort of thing. But anyway, so what was happening during that period of time was exactly when the audit risk standards were taking place at the international level. What happened for us is, as you know, in 2002, the PCAOB was formed, which cast us into the non-public sector, and the PCAOB took. So that's why there was a delay from the time the IAASB issued its risk standards, and we issued ours in 2005, and we passed that suite. And what was interesting in that, of course, is there was a standard in the risk assessment on audit materiality. After convergence, these are the. This is going backwards. There we go. So after convergence, there's these 3 standards. Interestingly, since I have this, I dissented to part of the materiality standard, myself and one other member of the board. You'll never find this stuff anymore. It was the first dissent in 25 years. Our dissent was mainly around the fact that the standard provided no guidance for what to do with iron curtain versus rollover method. And subsequently, in the U.S., the SEC passed a rule that said you must use the dual method, which you do both methods, and if it's material, you don't have to do that in the private sector. So we just did that. So these new standards opened a whole new area for us to do research. Okay? And so the next thing, this actually started when Osmond was there or a little after that. It's really sad when you write a paper and you say 2 decades later and you're the author on both of them, you know, so you know you've been around a long time. And so we started to update that earlier research that was done in materiality. And this was all driven, at least by this renewed interest by the profession in materiality. Some of you may not be aware, but there was this big controversy back in the late 90s about auditors waiving adjustments that would change earnings per share by 1 or 2 cents, and the stock market would drop, but you know, the price of the stock would drop. So they passed a rule with all these qualitative things. So this became a hot issue, and so we decided to go ahead and do an update on that. And again, it was published in the Auditing Journal. And so what are the key points? There was at least in what we found, there was variability in how the firms established planning materiality. Now, we have done a subsequent paper which has become pretty important, and I'll talk about that. And for the people in the class, I'll talk about that in great detail tomorrow. We needed to know how the auditors evaluated detected misstatements. Okay. Materiality related to internal control weaknesses. That may be more of a U.S. problem, but once Sarbanes-Oxley was passed, and you had to judge the materiality of internal control weaknesses. Multi-locations. How do we allocate materiality multi-locations? And lastly, materiality on attestation engagements, which today we're seeing a lot of work in sustainability. What's material in a sustainability audit? Much of that's being done both in Europe and Australia. And then my colleagues, Doug Prout and Steve Glover, who are on my textbook with Osmond in the international version, we worked on a model for how do you establish materiality for multi, and it's a very simple model that shows you how to allocate materiality across the number of components. And in our later work that Osmond and I did, we found that at least one of the firms was using our model in their practice. That model has been challenged now in an accounting review paper, but that's okay. Ours is easy to use, theirs is harder to use. So then I was asked to give a speech at the Internet conference a few years ago, and at that time there was a big push for auditing at the macro level. Where's our macro economist? The macro level. You know, how do audit fees affect this and that? And Peter knows my good friend Robert Neckel. He was involved with a lot of this macro stuff. And virtually everything I've done in auditing is at the task level, which is the micro level. How do auditors do audits? How well did they do audits at a task level? And then how can we help them? And so I wrote this essay, and the original one was, what do we know or don't know about the audit process? And so the thing goes on about a lot of things, but there were 2 research questions that came out of that study, which we have answered in our question. So how do auditors set planning and accountable misstatement? And how do they allocate materiality and location? So this is the paper you'll hopefully read. It was a very interesting study. I was able to get my colleagues on the Auditing Standards Board. I became very good friends with these people. The board meets and goes out and drinks wine and has a good time, you know. And so I thought it would be a good idea, could we get all of the firms' proprietary materiality on how they establish materiality? Could we get that? So I knew 5 of the main partners really well. So I wrote a email to them with a 2-page sort of proposal attached to it. And fortunately, one of my very good friends answered almost immediately saying, we're in. So once one firm gets hooked, guess what? You get them all. So I didn't have any contacts at the other 3, but we found them. They helped them to get that, Osmond. And so the 8 largest public accounting firms in the U.S. gave us all their proprietary data. Now, we have signed non-disclosure agreements. The firms are numbered 1 through 8. You can't tell which are big 8 or big 4, non-big 4. You can't tell which firm is, well, you might be able if you know your firm's methodology, okay? And so it turns out that now a lot of these current research papers are using this as their benchmark for comparison purposes, okay? And so we had 6 research questions, and tomorrow I'll actually put detailed tables up by each firm, et cetera. So what are the benchmarks the firms are using? Do they use assets, revenues, net income, whatever? What are the percentages they use to those benchmarks? How did the firms determine tolerable misstatement? Okay. What amounts are used to determine what's clearly trivial? The Americans, when we were writing our standard, thought that was funny. I think that's a UK term. And we didn't quite know what clearly trivial meant, but we went away with it anyways. How did they evaluate misstatements, which is really important, and then how is it applied to group audits? And so what are some of the results? And I'm not going to go into great detail. There's a significant amount of agreement across all of the firms about how they do these steps. Okay? Net income, total assets, total revenue, equity, and the percentage that they apply to each of those benchmarks. There's a lot of consistency. Okay? So that's somewhat inconsistent with what we found in the earlier review paper. I think that consistency is clearly driven by the fact we have formal materiality standards now. Okay? There was substantial agreement on how do you determine tolerable misstatement. It's basically 50 to 75%. And there's guidance on how do you get to whatever number there are. And then there's also agreement on what constitutes clearly trivial. And then I'm not going to read all of these. R5 talks about how do you actually judge some of these, judge the misstatements. And there's some, again, a lot of consistency there. And then lastly, in the time I gave my speech in 2010 to the time we did this, ISA 6, is it 610 or 600? Which one did I got? Might have got wrong up there on group audits. 600, okay. So the firms basically say we follow that standard. And so again, that's a good outcome. And so this has really pushed a bunch of our work. Martin Schmidt, one of the things I do, my wife and I do, is we adopt wayward PhD students or junior faculty. They come to our house and spend like 3 weeks there. And we've done this a couple times. So Martin came twice to stay at University of Nevada, but staying at my house mainly. And so what we've done in this paper, and it's forthcoming in the Accounting Review, which is one of our premier journals, in the auditing standards, there is ambiguity as to what you do when you have two adjustments that could be offset. And the standards say, they give you some guidance when the two statements are in the same account, but what do you do when they're in different accounts? Okay? So we manipulated that in an experiment. Okay? And we also had 3 levels of materiality. One where it only violated a qualitative factor, not tolerable misstatement or overall misstatement. We had one that fell in between tolerable misstatement and overall misstatement. I'm sorry, not misstatement, materiality. Okay? And there's ambiguity as what an auditor should do if an error is detected that's greater than tolerable misstatement but less than overall materiality. Okay? I'm looking at your shape. I'm trying to make sure I'm not. When we wrote the paper, Osmond and I, we had in there that if the item is greater than tolerable misstatement but less than overall misstatement, you must adjust. And that's what's in my textbook from way back when. Well, one of our agreements with this statement, or paper that Osmond and I did, was to send this to the firms, the first draft, to give them a shot to make sure. And we got back 2 comments. You know how Word puts in the comment things, right? Did the other firms agree with this comment? So I knew who they were who said it. And so I was at a meeting, and I grabbed the partner who gave us that comment, and I said, why is, if an account's misstated, then the financial statement's in me. He says, no, not so fast, Bill. He said, the account may be misstated, but the overall financial statements are not misstated. So there's 2 thoughts out there, okay? So one of the things we actually tested that in this study, okay? And so we ended up using 143 German Wirtschaftsprüfers. I say that right? And they were from 3 of the major and 4 mid-tier firms. Obviously, Martin found all these subjects for us. And so we basically had a case where people got different combinations across or between in one account or in 2 accounts, and then these 3 levels of materiality. So what do we find? First of all, I should point out, a lot of frauds have been perpetrated by netting accounts. The one we found very easily was WorldCom. Okay, and I did a simple search of the SEC and found 3 or 4 other firms where the word netting or offsetting is used in the site. So it's used, it can be used to make the things work. So the proportion of earners who required full adjustment of both misstatements was higher when it was in the 2 different accounts versus 1. So if it was in 2 different accounts, basically, they adjusted. Okay. The proportion who denied the bonus, that's the qualitative characteristic, was higher when the level of material was greater and the misstatements were in different accounts. So in this case, they denied the bonus, forced them to book both of them, which caused them to drop below the bonus constraint. Okay. And then the third one is more experienced auditors. By the way, we did not expect this. We had no expectation on experience here. But more experienced auditors are more likely to fully correct the misstatements when there's no client pressure, but when there's client pressure, they give in. One of the things we did manipulate was client pressure. That's pretty easy to do, okay? And so, as I said, this paper is coming out. I've been told it will be published in September of 2018, so you can see it's really going to be timely. And so this has been a fun project to work on, and I think you find good results. The other thing we've been working on is Osmond and I and my colleague Aaron Hamilton have been working on this other problem, quasi-related to materiality. Module 3 that we'll talk about talks about what do we do when we have these fair value estimates that have wide amount of uncertainty around them. Okay? There's one of the papers that we'll talk about shows an example where the amount of uncertainty related to what we report on the balance sheet as a point estimate is in fact 50 times materiality. Okay? And so how will investors react to this? So ask, those of you in practice, ask your friends what they think is material. So if you go to Vodafone, the first year that the FRC released required disclosure of materiality, Vodafone said materiality was 500 million pounds. That's about $700 million. So anything less than $700 million, who cares? Well, I'd love to have $700 million. They've now reduced it for a couple of reasons. But that's what's been, and there have been a lot of people who thought we ought to tell the public what our materiality is. So as an auditor, if you think of materiality, it's the precision with which we audit, right? It's the precision with which we audit. Okay. So I've always thought that we should disclose this. The other thing that we found, and this is actually done with the Norwegian case with last year's students. Okay. This estimation on uncertainty is in the financial statements. There's no doubt about it. What can management do to help? Well, one thing you can do is have footnote disclosure that shows you the sensitivity of the fair value estimate. So what happens to the estimate that's reported at a point estimate if it goes up by 10 kroner or down by 10 kroner? What would be the effect on income or whatever your relevant benchmark is? And it turns out that the case we use is a fish farm case. I won't tell you which one, but I think there are 9 publicly traded fish farm companies. I may be off by 1 or 2. So we actually used one of their footnotes, and they actually disclose how the change of the fair value of live fish. By the way, this really is a laugh in America when I present this. You know, that we have live fish as inventory, and that it varies by fair value. I actually have a couple of other, when I do it in the U.S., I actually show them a print of, you know, how the fish gets eventually out to the tanks and all that stuff. So the question is, are investors better able to evaluate the reliability of these certain estimates if we give them some information? Okay? And we believe that 2 pieces of information work. One, you give them the sensitivity. How sensitive is this fair value estimate to changes in the parameters? And the second is, let's just tell them what materiality is. What has been the precision of this audit? Okay? And so we had 193 graduate students from prior year class, and I guess your other class, right? They actually did it in our class. We had them come in with their laptops, and we sent them to a website, and they did it on Qualtrics. And so we told them to assume that they're non-professional investors, and we have this hypothetical fish company. And we varied the sensitivity, so we gave, for the quantitative, we gave them either one that varied a little bit, so maybe 10 kroner, and another that varied by maybe 100 kroner per kilo. Okay? And then we varied the presence of the disclosure of materiality or not. So one half of the people got an audit report that had no materiality, and the other had a materiality number. And so what do we find? We're referring to you now as investors. Investors generally perceive an estimate is more reliable when it is provided with supplemental analysis, the sensitivity analysis when it's quantitative. So ignoring the materiality disclosure, okay, if we just give you the quantitative sensitivity, it had a positive effect, okay? And so the other finding that's really important is, I guess it doesn't work. When we added to the sensitivity the materiality disclosure, the users, the investors, viewed the material as the financial statements as more reliable. So we think one of the ways to get around this uncertainty related to fair value estimates where there's wide degree of uncertainty is to do two things. Provide the user of the financial statements with a footnote disclosure on how sensitive the amount reported as a point estimate is, because this obviously affects net income, at least under this standard, okay? And secondly, by disclosing what was the amount of overall materiality in the audit report, they judged the information to be far more reliable, okay? We've butted our heads at one journal, which means it was rejected. They're claiming that we have done something that's not appropriate. We think they're wrong, but this happens in the process. But we think this, from a practical point of view, I think this is something. But this would require not only auditing standards to change, but accounting standards to change. Right now, it's sort of optional for the quantitative disclosure, and certainly it's optional in ISAs to disclose materiality. I wrote Schindler a long time. Is it Arnold Schindler who's was the head? I've written him on numerous occasions about disclosing this, and of course I don't always get. Yeah.
In the UK and the Netherlands, we have the requirement at this moment to disclose materiality in our audit reports for public listed.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
You refer to that. 4 years ago, when in the UK they started, and 3 years ago in the Netherlands they started. So we do not only have the requirement to issue to describe key audit matters, but also include our materiality used. Right. And I was there at that moment the standard setter in the Netherlands, and also responsible at my firm that you see for reviewing those reports. What we observed later on is that there was a huge difference in materiality that was used by the firms. There were certain firms who said, well, 5% profit before tax, that's the max for public interest entities. But we saw also some up to 10% disclosed by the firm, those firms in the old sport about materiality.
You'll find 10% in the guidance. We find it in one firm.
Yeah, sure. So what happened there is that there was an investment report by Citibank in the UK who reviewed, who analyzed all those reports, and they said, well, in this case, KPMG seems to have the highest materiality. And at that moment it was killing for KPMG because it suggests that you are, that you, as in a helicopter, you increase the height you are flying over. And what does it mean for the rigor of the audit? I don't say that it's affecting, but at least that firms that overshoot, we should change our materiality, so they decrease it. And we see in later years, second and third years, we saw that the firms are converging to each other's materiality because you don't want to be the highest. So at least it gave some more consistency. So what you said about all those hypotheses you had about all the firm methodologies, yes, they are converging somehow.
Yeah. There's a lot of research being done on that data. It turns out that I think your country is requiring disclosure of it, and PwC in Sweden and Finland have chosen to voluntarily disclose it. We found 2 companies with the disclosure in Finland and Sweden, right? Yeah, okay. So our point is, I mean, again, one of the things that, for me, for research is, does it have an impact on practice? And we think there's at least some possibility. Now, obviously, you can't rely on one test, but certainly we'd like to think that. So the last test, the paper, I've got, what, 2 minutes? Okay, I'll get us on time. The follow-up to this paper from the guidance was we were going to have interviews with the firms. And we decided that wasn't going to be very helpful to us after we wrote the paper. So we decided to use what's called an experiential questionnaire. And so what you do is you you develop a questionnaire, and basically you give the partner it, and you say, please describe a recent material misstatement that you have, and we gather all the statements on it. So what was the overall materiality? What was tolerable material? Did you adjust it? Did you waive it? What qualitative factors? It's a big, long data set that has taken us forever to. But the point here is that only 4 of the U.S. firms agreed to participate. 4 were worried about confidentiality issues. And even though we've tried to encourage them, we couldn't get them to join. And then in Norway, I think we have 5 firms, right? Yeah. So we have about 90 observations, give or take a few, of what partners' experiences have been with these large material misstatements. And so I highlight here in preliminary in bold, so don't take this away yet. But what do we find? The external auditor actually detected almost all of the misstatements, not the client. There are higher incidents of misstatements caused by internal control failure in the U.S. sample and inappropriate assumptions in estimated value in the Norwegian sample, and both samples had problems with understanding GAAP, the client's problem, okay? Compared to the Norwegian sample, the U.S. sample shows relatively more misstatements caused by internal control failure and understanding of GAAP, and fewer misstatements by incompetence in the other side. So, and the majority in both samples are factual errors. These are, you know what the number is. There was substantial variability in the benchmarks that were used across our observations. It turned out it was less consistent than what we had found in our methodologies. About half of them were booked. The others were waived. Now, we haven't gone back and done the test where they fit into the materiality scheme yet. That's one of the things that I'm leery about. Most of the U.S. respondents considered some qualitative factors, and in Norway, I don't think we found very many of them said they used qualitative factors. And then respondents consider the possibility of undetected misstatements when they identify them. So the idea is if you detect a misstatement, you really ought to consider, are there any more out there? And there's one firm that once the detected misstatements reach 80% of overall materiality, by definition, they have to go back and redo things because there's a higher likelihood that there's more stuff out there. Now, other firms have more qualitative descriptions of that. So we think this is going to be a fun paper. I had hoped to present it to the class. I think it's even on the syllabus, but I'm afraid to give it to you in its current state because it could easily be misinterpreted, and so it's going to take us a while. So in conclusion, I think materiality continues to be not only an interesting practice issue, as we're finding out by looking at what auditors are really doing. There's a lot of work going on in this data set in the UK, an enormous amount, not just the reporting by the FRC or the Citigroup, it's a lot of researchers who are doing that. Because the other thing that's happening is they're reporting these key audit, or what do we call key and what's the other CAMs or keys, yeah. And what's interesting is they're not only telling you what they are, but how they attack them, what kind of audit work they did. And that's a very interesting area for research. And then lastly, I think, a lot's been done, but there's a lot more to do. So hopefully you and I will be working on this stuff till they put us in the grave or something, So anyone have any questions? I'm happy to answer any questions. I went through some of the results quickly because I captured some of these slides from presentations I've made in other places. And any comments? I know these guys never ask questions, even in class, they never ask questions. Friday, I'm going to start calling on people. Oh, nobody's coming to class. Questions, comments? Okay, I'm 2 minutes over. So, okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bill. This was an interesting journey.
Thank you.
Through 40 years.
Not over yet.
But now it's lunch. Lunch is served out in the cantina. For those of you who want to sit down and have lunch, there are some tables and chairs in the cantina. We will put out some chairs in the meeting rooms. Some of you will have to take a standing lunch. I hope that's okay. After lunch, at 2 o'clock, I will continue with some practical information about the study. That is a session that is meant for the students, but anyone who wants to attend the session are welcome. Okay, lunch. Yeah. much.